In August of 1984, Reverend Bob Morgan was elected to the episcopacy from the North Alabama Conference. He was pastor at Vestavia Hills United Methodist Church. And that set in some motion some appointments in the conference. And Reverend Bill Davis called me and asked me if I would be willing to serve the McCoy United Methodist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Arkadelphia Road and 8th Avenue, just down from Birmingham Southern College. And I told him that I would be willing to do that, and was part of my excitement and commitment to being involved in the city, ministry in the city. And so Nancy and I, Lawton and Kevin and Beth Ann all packed up and moved to McCoy. Lawton and Kevin were involved in being students at Birmingham Southern College, which was just up the hill from us. And so in August, I forget the particular date when we moved, we moved into the parsonage beside the McCoy Church in 1984. And prior to coming there, I'd had a lot of experiences around discovering that my background, being born a white Southern male, and the implications of that about my attitude.
Just hold on to the ambulance. Ambulance gets back. I'll tell you where to start back.
Sure.
Okay, you were saying that I realized the circumstances of me being born white.
Yeah, I realized the circumstances of me being born a white Southern male and having the opportunity to eat Jim Crow all my life to determine that I was somebody, special as a white male and deserved that privilege.
Here comes another one. I'm sorry.
One nice thing about the city. Of course, that's the sound of God in the city, because it's headed to help somebody. And
Okay, let's. Okay, I guess you look straight into Marty's eyes and start up. And about that time, I realized.
And about that time, anyway, I was born in 1940 in Bauxite, Arkansas. And Arkansas and Alabama about the same places.
You're glancing up at me by accident.
All right.
So look straight in Marty's eyes.
All right, straight in Marty's eyes. All right, well, and so my dad would always had a lot of stories at the dinner table. He would tell us about black folks and white folks and how black folks always made good decisions if they decided to stay in their place, and if they didn't, they deserved to be punished and all that kind of stuff. And that sinks in pretty deep when you hear those things. But in the process of my journey, getting up to coming to the McCoy Church, I had experienced a call to ordained ministry and lived here in Birmingham, moved to Birmingham in 1966, and was involved in the West End United Methodist Church. And 1966 was quite traumatic years in Birmingham, just 3 years after the bombing 16th Street. And I had pretty well been dead until that time around racial issues or the civil rights movement or the Vietnam War or all of those kind of issues. All I was concerned about was getting my engineering degree from University of Alabama and taking care of my family. Moved to Birmingham, went to work for Alabama Power Company, and joined the West End United Methodist Church. And there between Sunday school and church, we would encounter all these conversations about the police officers, the business people, and others, with all of this diminishing and discounting information about Shuttlesworth and King and the black folks. And of course, I was agreeing with them completely because that's what I'd always heard, that they ought to stay in their place and they shouldn't do these things. And but during that time also, I was responding to a call to the ordained ministry. And had an interesting experience of the grace of God by reading John Wesley's sermons. I didn't know what grace was, didn't have any concepts about faith. I'd experienced this call to ministry, and in some sense it may have been more of a desire to save my own soul by entering into ministry than it was to try to really respond. I don't know where all that was, but I'm grateful to God for the call. And I'm grateful to God for all these experiences in Birmingham. I mean, I wouldn't trade them for anything in the world. This journey and this whole process of encountering God and God's love and call and justice, compassion for people. But I didn't know that then. And actually we didn't have but one black person to visit the West End United Methodist Church in those days, and the preacher didn't give a call to join the church when he came because he didn't want to deal with the results or questions or if somebody had tried to do that. But it wasn't long after that I went to seminary, read Dr. King's letter from Birmingham City Jail, and woke up to my consciousness that I was on the wrong side in opposition to what God wanted for the world and for people. And it was quite a traumatic experience for me. I wept, I think, for 2 weeks. But I thought I had dealt with a lot of all of that. And so I worked through seminary and came back to the North Alabama Conference and served 2 churches that were historically and predominantly white. No racial issues came up. There wasn't any reason for any of them to come up because we were still deeply segregated and there wasn't any interaction or any involvement. And that brings us back to the McCoy Church. So,
well, I just want to stop and say this is perfect. This is exactly what we need. So if we're nervous, we can stop. Because the light looks good, the sound is perfect, and you're just so relaxed and natural. It's a gift. Okay, back to you, Marty.
Oh, okay. Well, were you going to tell the story then about
yeah, well, here I'd had this experience a spiritual experience with discovering God's grace. Actually, that's interesting. I didn't say much about that, but I'd always tried to earn my salvation. I had to build all this wall against this horrible God that was going to get me if I didn't do everything right, that kind of experience of spirituality that I'd received from my church. And Nancy's dad, who actually was at the house Nancy and I live in now, Easter Sunday, somewhere in 1970, early 70s, 1970, after we had dinner, they invited me to go fishing. I had these compulsions about not going fishing on Sunday, that had been pretty well ingrained in me. So I told him no, I didn't want to go. And so I sat down outside and started reading one of Wesley's sermons and discovered that I wasn't saved by my opinions or my behavior, but by the grace of God. What an awesome experience. I mean, it was just overflowing joy and thanksgiving. And so I went and told Nancy's dad, I'm ready to go fishing. We went down the Warrior River, most beautiful sight you'd ever see in the whole world. The water, the whole world was different and new, So, I had that experience with accepting myself and understanding of my humanity and common humanity and God's love for all of us prior to that experience of the letter from the Birmingham City Jail. And so here I was, moving into Birmingham in 1984. And we unloaded our truck into the parsonage, and Nancy wanted something from the store. Well, there's a grocery store across the street. And so I headed out across the street to the grocery store to get whatever she wanted. And of course I came to McCoy out of a real intense joy and excitement about church growth in those days. Building numbers, which is the focus of the church all the time, trying to save itself instead of saving, caring or everybody, but I learned all those principles quite well. And as I was coming down the steps and down the walk over across 8th Avenue, in the middle of 8th Avenue, I saw this moving van backed up to the Blackstone Apartments. They're not there anymore, they've been turned down, but at the time, and of course one of the principles of church growth, you see anybody in transition, they're a candidate for church membership. You need to invite them to church. Well, when I got in the middle of 8th Avenue and looked over there, got ready to invite those folks to church, they were black. And so I came face to face with my history and with my experience and my struggles about all of this racial inclusiveness stuff, and I was not able to invite them to church. So I was paralyzed there in the road. You know, I had a sense of God asking me to invite them to church, but I just couldn't do it. I don't know how long I was there in the middle of the road. It was a very difficult struggle. And I was just paralyzed. Cars going boom on both sides of the turn lane. And finally I had a sense of God saying to me, Lawton, if you can't invite those folks to church, I can't use you in Birmingham. To go back across the street, pack your stuff, and leave. Well, I was too ashamed to go back, pack my stuff and leave and say I didn't want to be involved in ministry there. And so I reluctantly went across the street and invited them to church. And of course, they knew my reluctance. They could feel that. You know, you can tell whether your people are sincere and whether you're inviting them or caring for them. They didn't come to church. But it was in that moment, you know, that I became a recovering racist. I discovered my racial attitudes, and I understood that they were inconsistent with the scripture, and I understood the contemporary implications of that through my encounter with Martin King at seminary. And so on that day, I took the first step in my recovery, and I'm deeply grateful for that. It was an awesome gift. And began working to do all that I could do to build racially inclusive congregations and to work around the issues of social justice and community. And of course, I can't thank God enough for that privilege. These great folks I've met in Birmingham, particularly black folks, Fred Shuttlesworth, Elijah Jarrett, Abraham Woods, and on and on and on. So many great people, awesome people.
Okay, let's take a break here and let's all rest our arms and hands.
Thank you.
Because that's working. Your hands get paralyzed after a second.